Marcus Washington stared at the verdict on the screen, tears streaming down his face. The police officers responsible for raiding his home stood motionless. Nobody expected a black family to bring down an entire police department. The journey had cost him everything, but justice was finally served. Before we dive into this incredible story of courage and justice, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to support more stories of everyday heroes fighting against systemic racism. How would you react if armed officers burst into your home in the middle of the night? Let's find out what the Washington family faced. The Washington family lived in a beautiful two-story colonial home in the quiet suburb of Oak Ridge, Illinois. Their residence stood out not just for its well-maintained exterior and lush garden, but also because it belonged to one of only 3 black families in the predominantly white upper-middle-class neighborhood of Oak Ridge. Grove. Marcus Washington, 47, was a decorated Navy SEAL veteran with 20 years of distinguished service. After retiring from the military, he established his own security consulting firm, advising major corporations on risk assessment and protection protocols. His military background gave him a commanding presence, but those who knew him appreciated his thoughtful nature and dry sense of humor. His wife, Elise Washington, 45, had built a reputation as a formidable civil rights attorney with her own thriving practice, specializing in cases against institutional discrimination. Her current caseload included a high-profile lawsuit against the Oak Ridge Police Department for racial profiling incidents targeting black motorists. Their daughter, Zora Washington, 16, inherited her mother's sharp intellect and her father's unwavering sense of justice. As editor of her school newspaper and an aspiring journalist, she was currently investigating racial disparities in disciplinary actions at Oak Ridge High, where statistics showed black students received harsher punishments for identical infractions compared to their white peers. Despite their busy schedules, the Washingtons maintained a tight-knit family bond. They prioritized family dinner each evening, using this time to discuss their days and support each other through challenges. Marcus struggled with PTSD from his military service, occasionally waking with night terrors that transported him back to combat zones. Elise understood his triggers and had developed techniques to ground him during episodes. Zora, wise beyond her years, knew when her father needed space and when he needed company. The Washingtons were no strangers to subtle discrimination. Despite Marcus's distinguished military career and successful business, security guards followed him closely when he shopped at local stores. Neighbors sometimes crossed the street when they saw him jogging. Elise received backhanded compliments from colleagues about being so articulate and not like other black attorneys. At school, Zora endured microaggressions daily, from teachers expressing surprise at her academic achievements to classmates touching her hair without permission. The family had learned to navigate these indignities with dignity, choosing their battles carefully. One particularly frustrating pattern involved their neighbors calling police about suspicious activity whenever the Washingtons hosted family gatherings in their backyard. Officers would arrive, claiming they received complaints about noise or disturbances, despite the gatherings being no louder than similar events held by white neighbors. The evening before everything changed, the Washingtons had just finished dinner. Marcus helped Zora clear the table, while Elise shared updates about her case against the Oak Ridge Police Department. The department is fighting tooth and nail to keep the stop data sealed. Elise explained, frustration evident in her voice. Their attorneys filed another motion today to block our discovery requests. Marcus nodded, his security instincts heightened by something he couldn't quite identify. I noticed an unmarked vehicle parked down the street today. Been there since this morning. Tinted windows, government plates. Elise frowned. You think it's related to my case? Could be, Marcus replied. Or maybe I'm just paranoid. Military habits die hard. Zora joined the conversation, her expression serious. I found something interesting for my article. The school administration has been hiding disciplinary records. Black students are 3 times more likely to be suspended than white students for the same infractions. Principal Watkins is claiming it's because of cultural differences in behavior, not racism. The family discussed these troubling developments late into the evening before finally heading to bed. As Marcus checked the locks and set the security system, an uneasy feeling settled in his stomach. Years of combat had taught him to trust his instincts, and something felt wrong. Still, he couldn't have predicted what would happen just hours later when their lives would be violently upended in their own home. As Marcus finally drifted to sleep beside Elise, neither of them realized that forces were already in motion that would test their family's strength, resilience, and faith in the American justice system. Their fight against everyday discrimination was about to transform into something much larger and more dangerous than they could have imagined. The deafening crash of their front door being smashed open jolted the Washington family awake at 3:15 in the morning. Before they could process what was happening, blinding flashes and explosive sounds filled their home as flashbang grenades detonated in the hallway, disorienting everyone inside. Heavy boots thundered through the house as a heavily armed SWAT team stormed in assault rifles raised and laser sights dancing across walls and furniture. "Police, get down!" On the ground, now voices shouted from behind tactical helmets and face shields. Marcus was ripped from his bed and thrown face first onto the hardwood floor before he could even speak. A knee pressed into his back with crushing force as his arms were wrenched behind him and secured with zip ties so tight they immediately cut into his skin. "I'm not resisting," he managed to say, his military training kicking in to remain calm. The officer responded by pressing his face harder into the floor. "Shut your mouth unless you want a bullet." In the next room, Elise screamed as officers dragged her from bed by her hair. "I'm an attorney. You have no right to be in our home. I want to see a warrant." Her professional knowledge surfaced even in the chaos, but it only seemed to anger the officers more. One of them grabbed her by the throat and pushed her against the wall. "Another word and you're going to jail for obstruction," he growled, his face inches from hers. "You people always think you know the law." The most terrifying moments were happening in Zora's room, where the 16-year-old girl found herself staring down the barrels of multiple weapons. "Please don't shoot," she sobbed, her hands trembling in the air as officers shouted contradictory commands at her. "Get down! Stand up! Face the wall! Don't move!" One officer, a heavy-set man with cold eyes, used a racial slur as he roughly handcuffed her. "Another hood-rat family thinking they're special," he muttered to his partner loud enough for Zora to hear. Throughout the house, officers were tearing apart rooms with destructive efficiency. Furniture was overturned, mattresses slashed open, framed family photos smashed, and drawers emptied onto floors. They seemed less interested in finding contraband than in wreaking maximum havoc. Marcus, still pinned to the floor, tried again to defuse the situation. "Sir, I'm a veteran. 20 years Navy SEALs. Whatever you're looking for, we can talk about this reasonably." The officer, grinding his knee into Marcus's back, laughed. "Yeah, right, and I'm the Secretary of Defense. Save your lies." When they finally allowed Marcus to sit up, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead where it had been smashed into the floor, he saw Elise being interrogated in the living room. "Where are the drugs? Where are the weapons?" an officer demanded, towering over her. "We have reliable information about major distribution happening from this address." Elise's legal mind was racing despite the terror. "You have the wrong house. We're law-abiding citizens. I demand to see your warrant right now." The officer backhanded her across the face, splitting her lip. "The warrant is coming, and we don't make mistakes." The situation escalated further when officers brought Zora downstairs, her nightclothes torn and her face streaked with tears. One officer gripped her arm so tightly she winced in pain. "Daddy," she cried out when she saw Marcus's bloodied face. Something in Marcus snapped at seeing his daughter manhandled. His SEAL training triggered a protective response, and he lunged forward despite his restraints. "Take your hands off my daughter." Two officers immediately tackled him, driving him to the floor with savage force. One pressed a taser against his neck, while another delivered punishing blows to his kidneys. "Give me a reason," the officer with the taser snarled. "Just give me one reason to light you up." It was only when Commander Barrett, apparently the leader of the operation, received a radio call that the assault briefly paused. The commander frowned, checking a document in his hand. "What's the address here?" he demanded. 1124. Maple Street. Elise replied, her lawyer's precision automatic, even in crisis. Commander Barrett conferred with another officer, their voices hushed but tense. After a moment, his shoulders sagged slightly. "We were supposed to hit 1142 Maple Street," he admitted to his team, though loud enough for the Washingtons to hear. Instead of apologizing or immediately releasing the family, however, the officers huddled together, whispering urgently. Marcus, still on the floor, with blood pooling beneath his head from a deep gash, heard fragments "can't admit fault, liability issue, career suicide." Rather than acknowledging their catastrophic error, the officers seemed to be constructing a narrative to protect themselves. Meanwhile, the family remained detained. Marcus's head wound continued bleeding, soaking into the carpet. Elise requested medical attention for her husband, but the officers ignored her. "He's fine. Stop being dramatic." Zora sat trembling on the couch, watching her father's blood spread across the floor of their home, now unrecognizable with its destroyed contents. While the officers were distracted coordinating their cover-up, Elise managed to slide her phone from where it had fallen beneath the couch. Keeping it hidden, she activated the video recording function and positioned it to capture the officers' conversation. Commander Barrett finally approached them with a manufactured expression of professional regret. "There appears to have been a clerical error in the address. However, your uncooperative behavior and resistance has complicated the situation." Marcus, barely conscious from blood loss and the beating, managed to respond. "You broke into our home, attacked us without identifying yourselves properly, and we're uncooperative." The commander's face hardened. "Watch your tone. We could still find reasons to take you all in." As dawn broke, the officers finally prepared to leave the destroyed home. No apologies were offered, no medical assistance was called, no contact information for filing complaints was provided. Their parting words came from Commander Barrett. "Consider yourselves lucky. Clean this place up and forget tonight happened. Not everyone gets second chances." The SWAT team departed, leaving the Washington family in their demolished home. Marcus needed immediate medical attention. Elise's legal mind was already documenting everything while trying to comfort Zora, who couldn't stop shaking. As they surveyed the wreckage of their home and lives, they had no idea that this mistake was merely the beginning of a nightmare that would test their family to its breaking point. The morning after the raid, Chief Preston Whitfield of the Oak Ridge Police Department stood at a podium before a forest of microphones, his expression somber yet controlled. "Last night, our officers executed a high-risk warrant as part of our ongoing efforts to combat drug trafficking in our community," he announced, his voice steady, with practiced authority. "While there was an administrative error regarding the specific address, our officers followed standard procedure throughout the operation." The press conference continued with Department spokesman Lieutenant James Reynolds portraying the Washingtons as hostile and uncooperative during what he repeatedly referred to as an unfortunate misunderstanding. The subjects were combative and refused to comply with officer commands, which necessitated the use of approved restraint techniques. Reynolds stated, deliberately avoiding mention of Marcus's serious injuries or the destruction of the proved restraint techniques. Family's home. Had they simply cooperated, the situation would have been resolved quickly and without incident. Within 24 hours, Internal Affairs had already launched and concluded an investigation, clearing all officers involved of any wrongdoing. The report, merely 3 pages long, cited reasonable actions taken under difficult circumstances and proper adherence to department protocols. Local media outlets largely parroted the police narrative, with headlines like "Police Raid Meets Resistance" and "Address Mix-Up Leads to Tense Standoff." Only one reporter from a small independent news blog reached out to the Washington family for comment. Meanwhile, Marcus lay in a hospital bed, diagnosed with a severe concussion, 3 broken ribs, internal bruising, and a traumatic PTSD relapse that left him barely able to speak. Doctors noted his injuries were consistent with a severe beating, not the minimal force described in the police report. The attending physician, Dr. Lakshmi Patel, documented everything meticulously, telling Elise quietly, "This isn't the first case like this I've seen, but it's one of the worst." Elise had immediately contacted her law school classmate Benjamin Torres to represent the family, knowing she was too personally involved to handle the case herself. She spent hours on the phone with colleagues, most expressing sympathy but reluctance to take on the powerful Oak Ridge Police Department. "You know how these cases go," Elise, one attorney, told her. It'll be your word against theirs, and guess who the system believes Zora hadn't spoken since the raid. Her typically vibrant personality had retreated behind vacant eyes and trembling hands. She jumped at every sound and refused to be alone in any room. When Elise tried to convince her to return to school after 3 days, Zora had a panic attack so severe they nearly returned to the emergency room. Their home remained uninhabitable, with broken furniture, slashed mattresses, shattered glass, and Marcus's dried blood still staining the bedroom floor. The damage extended beyond physical destruction. Their sense of safety and security had been shattered just as thoroughly as their possessions. They temporarily moved in with Elise's colleague, Patricia Williams, whose guest house provided privacy and security while they figured out next steps. Elise filed a formal complaint with the police department, complete with photographs of their destroyed home and Marcus's injuries. The response came swiftly, a form letter acknowledging receipt of the complaint and assuring her it would be thoroughly reviewed according to department policy. When Elise tried contacting media outlets, most refused to cover the story or suggested they wait for the investigation to conclude. Social media posts about the incident were flagged and removed for community standard violations within hours of posting. The most disturbing discovery came a week after the raid when Benjamin Torres connected the Washingtons with the Johnsons, another black family whose home had been wrongfully raided 3 months earlier. Then came the Smiths, the Clarks, the Rodriguezes, and the Nguyen's, all families of color, all victims of address errors during raids. All had been threatened, homes destroyed, and family members injured. None had received justice or even acknowledgement of wrongdoing. The pattern was undeniable. These mistakes predominantly happened to families involved in community activism or those who had filed complaints against city institutions. The Johnsons had been organizing a tenant rights group. The Smiths had filed a discrimination lawsuit against the school district. The connection to Elise's current case against the Department for Racial Profiling seemed far from coincidental. Strange occurrences began plaguing the Washington family. Marcus's security consulting business suddenly lost 3 major clients within days, all citing budget constraints despite recently signed contracts. Their family car was frequently followed by unmarked vehicles. Zora received anonymous text messages describing her daily movements with disturbing accuracy. Blue sweater today, bold choice for someone who should be watching her back. Elise frequently spotted the same man taking photos of her entering and leaving her office building. When confronted, he would simply walk away without speaking. Every family member felt constantly watched, their privacy invaded, their movements monitored. The message was clear: drop everything, or the harassment would continue. Now, I want to ask you, have you ever experienced or witnessed racial profiling or police misconduct? Comment number 1. If you believe what happened to the Washington family could happen in your community. Comment number 2. If you think police departments should be held accountable for mistakes like this. Hit that like button if you're outraged by the treatment of this innocent family, and subscribe to follow their fight for justice. How far do you think this cover-up goes? Is it just a few corrupt officers, or does it reach higher levels? The Washington family is about to discover the shocking truth, and trust me, it goes deeper than anyone imagined. The Washington family might have been bloodied, but they were far from defeated. Marcus, still recovering from his physical injuries, made a crucial phone call from his hospital bed to his former SEAL team leader, Commander Jackson Riley. "Jack, I need your help," Marcus explained, his voice hoarse with pain. "They came for my family. This isn't over." Within 48 hours, 4 former Special Operations veterans arrived in Oak Ridge, setting up an unofficial security detail around the Williams guest house where the family was staying. These men, who had faced death alongside Marcus in war zones across the globe, moved with quiet efficiency, establishing surveillance and counter-surveillance measures. "Your 6 is covered," Brother Riley assured Marcus, using military terminology for watching someone's back. "Nobody gets near your family without us knowing." Meanwhile, Elise activated her own professional network. 7 prominent civil rights attorneys from across the country joined a video conference to form a legal coalition. "The Oak Ridge case isn't isolated," explained Vanessa Cortez, a powerhouse attorney from Los Angeles. We're seeing coordinated patterns of intimidation against black professionals in predominantly white communities nationwide. What happened to your family is the most egregious example yet, but it's part of something larger. Local support came from an unexpected quarter when Pastor Jeremiah Johnson of First Baptist Church, a historically black congregation in Oak Ridge, devoted his Sunday sermon to the Washington family's ordeal. When injustice comes to our community, silence is not an option, he thundered from the pulpit. The Washington family stood for justice before they were attacked, and now we must stand with them. The congregation responded with a standing ovation and pledges of support. Even more surprising was the small contingent of white neighbors who approached Elise after the service. Led by retired schoolteacher Margaret Peterson, they expressed outrage at what had happened. "We've lived in Oak Ridge for 30 years, and we've seen how differently black families are treated," Peterson said firmly. "What happened to your family was criminal, and we won't pretend otherwise." While these support systems were forming, Zora gradually emerged from her traumatized silence with a newfound purpose. "If no one will tell our story truthfully, I'll document everything myself," she told her parents, her journalist instincts reasserting themselves. She began methodically recording every detail of their ordeal, interviewing family members about their experiences, and researching similar cases nationwide. Her bedroom wall in the guest house became covered with timeline charts, newspaper clippings, and photographs connected by colored string, like a detective's investigation board. Marcus, drawing on his security expertise, installed hidden cameras around their temporary residence and Patricia Williams' property. "They're watching us, so we'll watch them back," he explained as he showed Elise how to access the encrypted feed on her phone. Knowledge is advantage. The family's legal team grew stronger when Officer Michael Sanderson, a rookie cop who had participated in the raid, made anonymous contact through Benjamin Torres. "What happened that night wasn't right," his typed message read. "Some of the guys bragged about teaching your family a lesson because of Mrs. Washington's lawsuit. It wasn't a mistake, your address was deliberately targeted." Intimidation tactics intensified as the Washingtons gathered strength. Patrol cars parked outside their temporary residence at all hours. Marcus was pulled over 5 times in 1 week for routine checks whenever he left the house. During one stop, an officer explicitly warned him, "Smart people know when to move on. Your family should consider relocating permanently." At school, Zora returned from lunch to find her locker vandalized with racial slurs and threatening messages. When she reported it to the administration, the principal suggested she might have done it herself for attention. Most alarming was the break-in at Elise's law office, where client files were rifled through and the hard drive containing evidence for her racial profiling case against the department was stolen, despite the building's security system being operational. The investigation into the break-in was cursory at best, with officers suggesting it was probably just kids looking for cash. The turning point came when Officer Sanderson provided a crucial piece of information: the raid on the Washington home was connected to an upcoming city development project called Oak Ridge Renaissance. The massive commercial and residential development was slated to transform several predominantly minority neighborhoods, but needed additional properties in Oak Ridge Grove to complete the land acquisition. Marcus and Elise spent a sleepless night researching the project, uncovering financial connections between Chief Whitfield and principal developer Platinum Holdings. Further digging revealed that all the wrongfully raided homes were located in areas targeted for the development. Even more disturbing was their discovery of internal police department quotas for arrests in black neighborhoods and falsified crime statistics that made these areas appear more dangerous than they actually were. Justification for both aggressive policing and eventually redevelopment. They're not just corrupt cops, Elise realized with growing horror. This is systematic displacement of people of color disguised as community improvement and crime reduction. With this knowledge, the Washington family and their growing coalition of supporters developed a two-pronged strategy: pursue legal action while simultaneously building public pressure through community organizing and media outreach. They established secure communications using encrypted messaging apps and implemented strict information security protocols. "We're in for a long fight," Marcus warned during a strategy session. "They have power, resources, and the benefit of systemic racism on their side. But we have the truth." The toll on the family remained heavy. That night, Marcus experienced his worst PTSD episode since returning from combat, triggered by a police helicopter circling their temporary residence. Elise found him huddled in the bathroom, shaking, uncontrollably, trapped in memories of both warfare abroad and the raid on their home. As she held him through the episode, whispering reassurances, Elise wrestled with doubt about continuing their fight. The system they were challenging had already demonstrated its willingness to use violence and intimidation. Could they protect their daughter while pursuing justice? Was the cost too high? But looking at Marcus, a decorated warrior reduced to terror in his own country, in what should have been the safety of his home, her resolve hardened. This wasn't just about one night of violence or one family's trauma. It was about confronting a system that viewed Black lives and rights as expendable in service to power and profit. The gathering forces of support around them would need to be strong indeed for the battle ahead. The coordinated attack on the Washington family began with frightening precision 2 days after they filed their federal civil rights lawsuit. Marcus received an official letter from the Internal Revenue Service announcing an immediate audit of his security consulting business for the past 5 years. The notification cited significant discrepancies in reported income, though Marcus's accountant confirmed all filings were immaculate. Simultaneously, the Illinois Bar Association received an anonymous ethics complaint against Elise, alleging client fund mismanagement and professional misconduct serious enough to warrant emergency suspension of her license pending investigation. The complaint included fabricated bank statements and falsified client testimony so sophisticated that even Elise's legal team was momentarily concerned. At Oak Ridge High School, Zora was called to Principal Watkins' office, where 2 police officers waited with a drug-sniffing dog. "We received an anonymous tip," Watkins explained with poorly concealed satisfaction. A search of Zora's locker yielded a small bag of pills that Zora had never seen before, planted sometime after morning classes. Only Benjamin Torres' immediate intervention and demand for fingerprint analysis prevented her immediate arrest, though the school issued a temporary suspension pending investigation. Perhaps most devastating was the certified letter from their mortgage company, indicating foreclosure proceedings had been initiated due to 3 missed payments, despite bank records showing all payments had been made on time and electronic receipts confirming this. When Elise contacted the mortgage company, their representative claimed their internal system showed no record of recent payments and suggested the family must be confused about their payment history. The attack extended to the media landscape, where the Oak Ridge Chronicle ran a front-page story headlined "Lawsuit Plaintiff's Violent Military Past Raises Questions." The article selectively quoted from Marcus's service record, highlighting combat incidents while omitting his commendations and honorable discharge. It suggested his PTSD made him potentially unstable and prone to misinterpreting police actions. Social media platforms became battlegrounds as anonymous accounts flooded local community groups with posts claiming the Washingtons had known criminal connections. Fabricated photographs showed Marcus meeting with known drug dealers. False stories circulated about Elise defending violent criminals pro bono. Doctored school records suggesting Zora had a history of behavioral problems appeared on parent forums. The family's digital footprint was being systematically poisoned. Local television station Woke featured interviews with neighbors who claimed they always felt unsafe around the Washington family. "There were always strange people coming and going at odd hours," claimed one woman who lived 3 blocks away and had never actually met the family. "I kept my children away from their house." Another neighbor suggested Marcus's security business might be a front for illegal activities. "Why else would a family like that move to this neighborhood?" he asked, the racial implication unmistakable. The community polarization intensified daily. Families who had initially expressed support for the Washingtons began receiving their own warnings. Margaret Peterson, the retired teacher who had spoken out at church, found her car vandalized with the message "Race Traitor" scratched into the paint. The Williams family, who had provided the guest house, received anonymous calls describing their children's daily routes to school in chilling detail. Several white allies who had planned to testify about witnessing discrimination withdrew after similar intimidation. Yet some neighbors stood firmer in response to the pressure. The Jacobsons, A white couple next door to the Washingtons' actual home installed security cameras, specifically to monitor police activity in the area, and publicly announced they were doing so. Rabbi David Goldstein of Temple Beth Shalom organized an interfaith prayer vigil outside the police department, bringing together religious leaders from across the community despite threats to participating congregations. Racial tensions in Oak Ridge reached levels not seen in decades. Black residents reported increased traffic stops and police harassment. White residents who expressed support for the Washingtons found themselves socially ostracized by friends and colleagues. At Oak Ridge High, students divided along racial lines, with several physical altercations breaking out in hallways and the cafeteria. Zora's friends faced intense pressure from parents to distance themselves from her. "My dad says, I can't hang out with you anymore," texted her former best friend Lily. "He says your family is trouble and it could hurt his business if people see us together. I'm sorry." Legal obstacles mounted with suspicious consistency. Judge Walter Carrington, who had attended Police Chief Whitfield's wedding and whose brother-in-law was on the city council, was assigned to the case despite clear conflicts of interest. Torres's motion for recusal was denied without explanation. Key evidence, including medical records documenting Marcus's injuries, mysteriously disappeared from court filings despite confirmation of receipt. Multiple witnesses who had initially agreed to testify about the pattern of wrongful raids changed their stories after police interviews, suddenly unable to recall critical details or claiming they had misunderstood what they saw. The legal team itself faced growing professional threats. Benjamin Torres discovered he was being followed to client meetings. Vanessa Cortez's law firm lost 3 major corporate clients within a week, all citing concerns about negative publicity. The junior associates working on the case received middle-of-the-night phone calls with recordings of their children's voices, followed by text messages with their home addresses. The crisis reached a breaking point when Marcus, triggered by a police helicopter circling their temporary residence, suffered a complete breakdown. The combination of physical injuries, PTSD, and relentless stress overwhelmed his coping mechanisms. Elise found him unresponsive and rushed him to the hospital, where doctors recommended immediate psychiatric admission. That same evening, Elise discovered through a trusted source that their attorney-client privilege had been breached. Their legal communications were being monitored through sophisticated spyware installed on their devices. Most horrifying was Zora's discovery of a hidden camera in her bedroom at their temporary residence, planted during what appeared to be a routine security system check days earlier. The camera had been disguised as a smoke detector and connected to an external server. The knowledge that unknown individuals had been watching her most private moments drove Zora to vomit repeatedly before curling into a fetal position, unable to speak or make eye contact. As Elise sat in the hospital beside her sedated husband while their traumatized daughter was being examined in another room, she faced the hardest question of her life. Was justice worth the complete destruction of her family? The system they too hard were fighting had revealed its willingness to use every weapon at its disposal: legal, financial, professional, social, and psychological. The Washington family stood at the precipice of total ruin, with no guarantee that truth would eventually prevail. For the first time since the nightmare began, Elise seriously considered taking the settlement offer that had been quietly extended through intermediaries. A substantial sum in exchange for dropping all claims and signing a proprius, non-disclosure agreement. The money would allow them to relocate, rebuild their lives, and get the psychological help they desperately needed. All they had to do was surrender their fight for justice and the chance to protect other families from similar abuse. The choice before her seemed impossible: her family's immediate safety and recovery versus the larger fight against systemic injustice. As she watched Marcus's chest rise and fall in medicated sleep, Elise Washington made the hardest decision of her life. Officer Michael Sanderson sat in his parked car 3 blocks from Oak Ridge Community Hospital, hands trembling as he checked his watch for the 4th time in 5 minutes. His police radio crackled with routine calls, a sound that once gave him pride but now filled him with nausea. The 26-year-old rookie cop had joined the force with idealistic notions about protecting and serving his community. 9 months later, those ideals lay shattered like the Washington family's front door. "I can't be part of this anymore," he whispered to himself, gathering courage for what he was about to do. Inside the hospital, Elise Washington received a text message from an unknown number, "Need to talk. Information that will help. South parking lot white Civic. 5 minutes. Suspicious, but desperate." She asked one of Marcus's SEAL teammates to accompany her. Officer Sanderson flinched when the passenger door opened and a stone-faced man with military bearings slid into the seat beside him. "Mrs. Washington will listen from the back seat," the man said flatly. "If I sense any threat to her, this conversation ends permanently." Understood. When Elise entered the car moments later, Sanderson's composure cracked. "I'm sorry," he blurted, tears welling in his eyes. "What we did to your family was wrong. The raid, the cover-up, all of it. I've been trying to convince myself we were just following orders, but I can't sleep, can't eat." He described joining the force after college, excited to make a difference. How senior officers gradually normalized racism, teaching rookies which neighborhoods to target and how to write reports that justified excessive force. How the raid on the Washington home had been planned specifically to intimidate Elise because of her lawsuit against the department. "It wasn't a mistake," Sanderson confirmed. "Commander Barrett deliberately targeted your address after Chief Whitfield ordered him to send a message. They called it preventive community policing, but it was just terrorism with a badge." Elise, maintaining remarkable composure, asked, "Are you willing to go on record with this information?" Sanderson nodded, his career, and possibly his safety forfeit, with that simple gesture. "I've already started wearing a wire to department meetings. I have recordings of officers discussing targeting your family and others. They're planning something big against the community organizers working with you." In the following days, Sanderson became their most valuable asset, providing crucial evidence that transformed their case. Bodycam footage from the raid, mysteriously lost from department servers, appeared in Elise's encrypted email. Internal communications documented explicit discussions about silencing the Washington family by any means necessary. Financial records revealed a complex web of payments between the police department's foundation, city officials, and developers. Most damning was documentation of 17 other wrongful raids against families of color, systematically covered up through identical tactics of intimidation and false reports. The breakthrough extended beyond evidence, gathering when national journalist Angela Rivera, known for her exposés on institutional corruption, contacted Benjamin Torres after receiving an anonymous package of documents related to the Propolis, Angela Rivera, Washington case. "This isn't just a local story," Rivera told Torres during their first call. "This is systematic abuse of power targeting black professionals who threaten the status quo. I want to break this nationally." Her first piece, titled "Badges and Bulldozers: How Police Power Serves Development Interests in Oak Ridge," appeared on a major news platform and immediately went viral. The article meticulously connected the wrongful raids to the Oak Ridge Renaissance Development Project, exposing the financial incentives motivating the campaign of terror against black homeowners. Social media campaigns organized by Pastor Johnson's congregation and Rabbi Goldstein's Interfaith Coalition finally gained traction. The hashtag number Justice for Washingtons trended nationally after several celebrities and civil rights leaders shared Zora's powerful video testimony about the raid and its aftermath. Other victims began coming forward their stories, creating a damning pattern impossible to dismiss as isolated incidents. The system, sensing its vulnerability, retaliated with escalating violence. Officer Sanderson was found beaten nearly to death in the police department parking garage, a warning note pinned to his bloodied uniform. "This is what happens to rats." Jack Riley, Marcus's SEAL teammate providing security, had his car bombed in his driveway, though he escaped with minor injuries thanks to his combat-honed instincts. Death threats became so frequent that the Washingtons had to relocate to a safe house outside the city, their movements restricted to essential travel with security escorts. Most alarming was the disappearance of Diana Chen, a city planning department whistleblower scheduled to testify about document falsification related to the development project. She vanished the night before her deposition, her apartment left in disarray with signs of struggle. Local police classified it as a voluntary absence despite evidence to the contrary. Faced with escalating danger, the Washington family made a strategic decision that stunned their opponents. They would go completely public with everything they had, holding nothing back for court. "They're trying to silence us through fear," Marcus told their assembled supporters, having checked himself out of the hospital against medical advice. "We remove that power by refusing to be silenced. Everything we know, the world will know." Zora, channeling her trauma into activism, created a 30-minute video documenting their ordeal with remarkable journalistic objectivity despite her personal connection. The video included testimony from other victims, expert analysis of the pattern of abuse, and clear evidence of the corruption connecting the police department to development interests. It concluded with a call for federal investigation and community solidarity against institutional racism. "My family's story isn't unique," Zora stated in the video's powerful closing. "The only unusual thing is that we had the resources and support to fight back. How many families have been broken in silence? How many communities destroyed? This isn't about one raid or one family. It's about a system that views Black lives as obstacles to profit and power." As Marcus stood beside his daughter at a community rally organized by their growing coalition of supporters, his health visibly fragile, but his resolve unbroken, he addressed the crowd. "I fought for this country, believing in its promise of the country believing in its promise. Freedom and justice. I never imagined my hardest battle would be fought on American soil in my own home against those sworn to protect and serve. But this is a battle we will win. Not just for our family, but for every family that deserves to live without fear in their own community." Elise filed an expanded federal civil rights case and formally requested Justice Department intervention, attaching over 700 pages of evidence compiled through their investigation. The comprehensive filing detailed not just the raid and subsequent harassment, but the entire corrupt system that had targeted families of color for years. The document concluded with a damning section, connecting similar patterns in cities nationwide, elevating their case from a local incident to evidence of a national crisis requiring federal response. What do you think about Officer Sanderson's decision to come forward? Comment number 1. If you believe more police officers should break the blue wall of silence when they witness misconduct. Comment number 2. If you think whistleblowers deserve stronger protection. Hit that like button. If you're inspired by the Washington family's courage in the face of overwhelming opposition, and subscribe to follow their journey through this critical turning point. The question now isn't just whether the Washington family can win their fight, but whether an entire system of corruption and racism can be dismantled. Are you ready to see how high this conspiracy really goes? The Washington family's story exploded across the national consciousness like a thunderclap impossible to ignore and devastating in its impact. Major news networks that had previously ignored their case now scrambled to secure exclusive interviews. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, and every major online platform featured segments on what was rapidly becoming known as the Oak Ridge Conspiracy. Zora's documentary video accumulated 10 million views within 24 hours of posting, with translations appearing in 12 languages as international viewers shared it across borders. The raw footage of Marcus's injuries, combined with Zora's straightforward narration and the meticulously presented evidence, created an undeniable narrative that transcended political divisions. "This isn't about left or right," commented one conservative commentator, visibly shaken after watching the video. "This is about American citizens being terrorized in their own home by the government." Civil rights organizations mobilized with unprecedented coordination. The NAACP-ACLU Southern Poverty Law Center and dozens of grassroots organizations formed a united coalition supporting the Washington family and the broader cause their case represented. Prominent attorneys from across the country volunteered to join their legal team pro bono, creating what the media dubbed the Justice Army. Congressional representatives from both parties called for formal investigations, with several members of the Black Congressional Caucus making personal visits to the Washington family's safe house to offer support. What happened to the Washingtons could happen to any black family in America, regardless of education, profession, or social standing, stated Congresswoman Ayanna Reynolds during a press conference on Capitol Hill. This case exposes the lie that respectability protects us from racism. The Oak Ridge Police Department entered full crisis mode as public opinion turned decisively against them. Chief Preston Whitfield's emergency press conference became a disaster when he attempted to maintain the narrative of a simple address error while dismissing the growing evidence of corruption. When questioned about financial connections to Platinum Holdings, he abruptly ended the conference, shoving past reporters while refusing to answer further questions. The department's unified front began cracking under pressure. Junior officers, fearing for their careers and potential criminal charges, started distancing themselves from superiors. Anonymous leaks from within the department revealed officers had been instructed to destroy evidence and coordinate testimony. The police union, initially steadfast in defending all officers involved, issued a carefully worded statement acknowledging concerning allegations that merit thorough, independent investigation. Mayor Thomas Harrison, who had previously backed the police department, unconditionally held a somber press conference, announcing he had requested state police oversight of the Oak Ridge force and was forming a civilian review committee. Political observers noted his dramatic shift coincided with polls showing his approval rating had plummeted to 17%, with 78% of residents believing the Washington family's account of events. As documents continued leaking daily, the scope of corruption became increasingly apparent. Links between Chief Whitfield and wealthy developer Samuel Reynolds, CEO of Platinum Holdings, extended back 15 years, with millions of dollars flowing through various foundations and consultant arrangements. Reynolds had contributed heavily to the campaigns of key city officials, including the mayor and district attorney. Most disturbing were emails revealing explicit discussions about using police intimidation to pressure homeowners in targeted development areas to sell their properties below market value. The involvement of state officials emerged when Governor Wilson's chief of staff was captured in email exchanges discussing how to expedite property acquisition for the Oak Ridge Renaissance Project by utilizing all available municipal resources, a thinly veiled reference to police pressure tactics. The governor immediately placed his chief of staff on administrative leave, claiming no knowledge of these communications, though further leaks suggested his office had been intimately involved in coordinating the development strategy. The coordinated system targeting black homeowners for displacement was exposed in excruciating detail, falsified crime statistics used to justify aggressive policing, in certain neighborhoods fraudulent building code violations issued to decrease property values, tax reassessments, targeting specific homes, and ultimately police intimidation for families who refused to sell. The pattern of wrongful raids was revealed as just one tactic in a comprehensive strategy of economic and social violence against communities of color. Despite mounting public support and damning evidence, the Washington family still faced enormous personal costs. Marcus's health continued deteriorating under the relentless stress, with doctors warning that his cardiac function showed concerning changes. Elise worked nearly 20 hours daily coordinating legal strategy while managing the growing coalition of supporters surviving on caffeine and determination. Zora, though, finding purpose in activism, suffered nightmares, so severe she required medication to sleep, and her academic performance had plummeted from straight as to barely passing. The financial strain became critical as legal expenses mounted and Marcus's business remained effectively shuttered. Their temporary housing arrangement couldn't continue indefinitely, yet returning to their still damaged home wasn't viable given ongoing safety concerns. Community fundraisers helped with immediate needs, but the family's long-term financial stability remained in jeopardy. The legal battle faced a devastating setback when federal Judge Raymond Wilson, a recent appointee with ties to Governor Wilson's administration, dismissed their case on a jurisdictional technicality ruling that they needed to exhaust all state remedies before bringing federal claims. The decision, widely criticized by legal experts as misapplying established precedent, effectively reset their legal fight to square one after months of progress. Simultaneously, a key witness who had provided documentation about the financial connections between the police department and developers recanted his testimony after his teenage daughter received an envelope containing surveillance photos of her daily routine, along with a lock of her hair. Though the witness privately confirmed to Benjamin Torres that his original testimony was truthful, he refused to restate it on record, fearful for his family's safety. Most concerning was Officer Sanderson's complete disappearance following his release from the hospital. His apartment was found empty, his bank accounts closed, and his family claimed no knowledge of his whereabouts. Whether he had gone into hiding for protection or met with foul play remained unknown, but his absence removed their most credible insider witness. In a calculated counterattack, developer, Samuel Reynolds, filed a $10 million defamation lawsuit against the Washington family Benjamin Torres and journalist Angela Rivera, claiming their false allegations had damaged his reputation and business interests. The lawsuit, clearly designed to drain their resources and distract from the core issues, nevertheless required response and added another layer of legal complexity to their already overwhelming situation. During a private moment in their safe house away from cameras and supporters, Marcus and Elise faced the hardest conversation of their marriage. "We might not win this," Marcus admitted, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. "They have unlimited resources, political connections, and they're willing to hurt people. We have the truth, but sometimes that's not enough." Elise, equally exhausted, nodded. "I've been thinking about the settlement offer. We could take it, move somewhere new, start over. Zora could finish school somewhere safe." They sat in silence, the weight of potential surrender heavy between them. Down the hall, they could hear Zora on a video call with student activists from across the country who had organized solidarity protests in their own communities. Her voice, despite everything, carried the clear resonance of purpose and conviction. "My parents taught me that justice isn't just about what's convenient," she was saying. "It's about what's right, even when it costs you everything." Marcus and Elise looked at each other, a silent understanding passing between them. Whatever they decided would shape not just their family's future, but potentially the fight against systemic racism in communities nationwide. The battle had gone public, but its ultimate outcome remained balanced on a knife's edge of courage, resources, and will. The Washington family gathered around their safe house kitchen table, the atmosphere heavy with fatigue and uncertainty. Marcus, noticeably thinner after weeks of stress and minimal appetite, rubbed his temples to alleviate another pounding headache. "Maybe we should consider the settlement," he said quietly, voicing the thought that had been haunting him. $75,000. Enough to relocate, start fresh somewhere, nobody knows us. Elise's usually immaculate appearance had given way to dark circles under her eyes and hair hastily pulled back. "If we take it, everything stays hidden. All the other families who were raided, all the corruption, all of it buried." Zora, who had been silently scrolling through social media messages, looked up sharply. "You taught me never to back down from bullies." "That's what they are, just bullies with badges and business suits." The family had reached their breaking point. Marcus's doctor had warned that his continued stress levels were potentially life-threatening, with his blood pressure dangerously elevated and PTSD symptoms increasingly debilitating. Elise's law practice existed in name only after months of neglect, her professional reputation under systematic attack. Zora's school performance had collapsed so completely that summer school, or repeating the year, seemed inevitable. Their financial resources were nearly depleted, with legal costs mounting daily despite pro bono assistance. The modest college fund they had built for Zora had been emptied to cover basic living expenses. Even their most dedicated supporters were showing signs of fatigue as the fight dragged on without clear resolution. The conversation about surrender was interrupted by Benjamin Torres, calling with news that left them speechless. An anonymous source had just leaked 27 gigabytes of internal police department files, development contracts, and government communications to every major news outlet simultaneously. The massive document dump, extensively encrypted and routed through foreign servers to protect the source, contained irrefutable evidence of the conspiracy they had been fighting to expose. Internal police memos explicitly discussed using raids to intimidate homeowners in targeted development zones. Email exchanges between Chief Whitfield and developer Samuel Reynolds detailed which families should receive special attention from the department. Body cam footage showed officers planting evidence during raids and coaching each other on fabricating reports. Financial records documented millions of dollars flowing through shell companies to reward cooperative officials. Most damning were recorded conversations of Mayor Harrison, discussing the need to clean out certain elements to make neighborhoods attractive for upscale development, using barely coded racial language to identify which communities should be targeted. The leak dominated news cycles within hours. CNN ran a special report titled American Injustice: The Oak Ridge Files, featuring analysis from legal experts, civil rights leaders, and former law enforcement officials, all expressing shock at the scope of corruption exposed. The story transcended partisan divides, with conservative outlets equally outraged at the abuse of government power against law-abiding citizens. As the Washington family absorbed this dramatic turn of events, another surprise emerged. Officer Michael Sanderson reappeared, having been in protective custody with federal marshals. He had spent his disappearance recording conversations with senior officers who believed he remained loyal despite his injuries. His evidence included a confession from Commander Barrett that the raid on the Washington home had been deliberately planned as retaliation for Elise's lawsuit, with officers instructed to make it hurt while maintaining plausible deniability. Public support translated into tangible assistance when a community fundraiser organized by Pastor Johnson and Rabbi Goldstein raised over $300,000 in 48 hours, enough to save their home from foreclosure and cover immediate medical and living expenses. An anonymous donor, later revealed as a prominent black entertainment executive who had faced similar police harassment, contributed an additional $200,000 to establish a foundation supporting other victims of police misconduct. The FBI officially announced a full field investigation into the Oak Ridge Police Department, city government, and associated business interests. Agents arrived at police headquarters with search warrants for electronic devices and physical documents, while simultaneous raids occurred at City Hall, the offices of Platinum Holdings, and the homes of several officials. Chief Whitfield, Mayor Harrison, and developer Reynolds all retained criminal defense attorneys as reports circulated about imminent indictments. The Washington family faced a critical decision whether to risk everything on one final comprehensive legal strategy. After hours of discussion with their expanded legal team, they chose the most audacious approach, consolidating all evidence into a RICO Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act case, naming 37 individuals, 14 entities, as participants in a criminal enterprise targeting communities of color for financial gain through abuse of government power. "This isn't just about what happened to us," Marcus explained to supporters. "It's about exposing how racism becomes institutionalized and profitable, how systems of power protect themselves by targeting those who speak up." Marcus's military connections proved invaluable when his former commanding officer, now a high-ranking Pentagon official, arranged for private security contractors to protect the family and key witnesses. These professionals, many former Special Forces operators, implemented protocols typically reserved for high-threat diplomatic missions, creating a security bubble that finally allowed the family to move about with reasonable safety. Elise prepared for the most significant legal battle of her career, working alongside a team of the nation's top civil rights attorneys to craft a case that would potentially redefine how courts addressed systemic racism. Her approach integrated novel legal theories about collective institutional liability with traditional civil rights claims, creating a framework that could serve as precedent for similar cases nationwide. Zora organized a national student walkout through her network of young activists, with over 70,000 students in 27 states participating in coordinated demonstrations against police brutality and institutional racism. Her articulate interviews on major networks established her as a powerful voice of her generation, combining personal experience with sophisticated policy analysis remarkable for her age. The opposing forces made their final attempt at intimidation the night before the RICO filing, An unmarked van approached the Washington's new secured residence occupants, attempting to disable the security system. The family's protection detail intercepted the intruders, identifying them as private contractors with indirect connections to the police department. Rather than escalating to violence, the security team documented the attempted break-in, adding fresh evidence to their case, while ensuring the family remained safe. Marcus, drawing on training that had prepared him for high-stress combat situations, led the family through the darkness of that night with steady calm. "We've come too far to be afraid now," he told Elise and Zora, as they waited in the safe room while the security team handled the situation. "Tomorrow we take the fight to them on our terms." As dawn broke, the Washington family emerged from their residence surrounded by supporters and security personnel ready to file the case that would send shockwaves through the legal system and potentially transform how America addressed the intersection of race, power, and justice. Against overwhelming odds, they had transformed from victims to the vanguard of a movement larger than themselves. Their journey from a single wrongful raid to challenging entrenched systems of oppression embodied the fundamental American principle that justice, though delayed and denied, could still be demanded and possibly delivered. 573 days after armed officers smashed through their front door, the Washington family sat in the federal courthouse as Judge Amara Robinson delivered her ruling, in a voice that resonated through the packed chamber. The evidence presented in this case reveals a disturbing pattern of corruption, racial targeting, and systematic violation of constitutional rights that cannot stand in a society governed by rule of law, she stated, her expression grave. This court finds overwhelmingly in favor of the plaintiffs on all counts. The gallery erupted in muffled gasps and quiet sobs as Judge Robinson detailed the comprehensive victory damages, totaling $11 million against the city police department and individual officers, criminal referrals for 12 officers including Chief Whitfield, a consent decree placing the department under federal oversight for a minimum of 5 years, and a precedent-setting ruling that racially targeted police actions could constitute a RICO violation when connected to financial interests. On the courthouse steps, surrounded by supporters and media, Marcus Washington stood with his arm around Elise Zora between them. The family that had been terrorized in their home now stood as victors against a system many had considered invincible. "Today's ruling isn't just for our family," Marcus told the assembled cameras, his voice steady despite visible emotion. "It's for every family who has faced injustice without the resources or platform to fight back. It's for every black person who wasn't believed when they spoke truth about their treatment. It's for every community targeted for destruction in the name of development or progress." The ripple effects extended far beyond their case. Within weeks, criminal indictments came down against Chief Preston Whitfield on multiple felony counts, including conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and civil rights violations. Mayor Harrison resigned rather than face, recall his political career in shambles, as investigations uncovered his central role in coordinating the targeting of minority neighborhoods. Developer Samuel Reynolds watched his business empire crumble as investors fled and projects were canceled amid revelations of systematic corruption and racism. Banks withdrew financing from Platinum Holdings as the Justice Department opened investigations into money laundering and fraud. The consent decree mandated sweeping changes in police department policies, particularly regarding raids, use of force, and community oversight. No-knock warrants were severely restricted with multiple authorization levels required. Body cameras became mandatory with automatic penalties for deactivation. Most significantly, a civilian review board with actual disciplinary authority was established, comprised of community members from diverse backgrounds with particular representation from previously targeted neighborhoods. Other cities took notice. Similar investigations launched in 12 municipalities where comparable patterns emerged of police power being weaponized to serve development interests in minority communities. The Oak Ridge model of legal action became a template for civil rights attorneys nationwide, combining traditional claims with RICO elements to address systemic abuses more comprehensively than previously possible. The personal victories came alongside the systemic ones. Marcus finally receiving proper treatment for his PTSD through a specialized program for trauma survivors, gradually reclaimed his health and psychological well-being. The recognition that his symptoms stemmed not just from combat, but from the profound betrayal by institutions he had served, helped guide his recovery process. "I fought for this country," he explained, during a panel on veteran issues and racial justice. "Then this country fought against me. Reconciling those realities has been my hardest battle." Elise received an unexpected phone call from the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division, offering her a senior position, heading a new task force on law enforcement accountability. After careful consideration and family discussion, she accepted, recognizing the opportunity to transform her personal trauma into institutional change from within the system. "Sometimes you have to enter the power structure to reshape it," she explained to colleagues, questioning her decision to work within government after being victimized by it. Zora's remarkable poise throughout the ordeal and her effective communication skills earned her a full scholarship to Columbia University's journalism program, though she deferred acceptance for a year to complete a documentary about families affected by police misconduct. The film After the Raid: American Families Against American Injustice premiered at the Sundance Film Festival to critical acclaim and widespread distribution. Perhaps most meaningful was the transformation within their community. Neighbors who had believed police narratives and avoided the family during their ordeal now approached with genuine remorse. Margaret Peterson, the retired teacher who had stood by them from the beginning, organized a community reconciliation project, bringing together residents for honest conversations about race and privilege. The difficult dialogues led to concrete actions, including a neighborhood association committed to monitoring police activity and supporting families experiencing discrimination. Former opponents like Principal Watkins, who had suspended Zora during the crisis, made public apologies after evidence revealed his cooperation with the police department's intimidation efforts. "I failed as an educator and as a human being," he acknowledged during a school board meeting before announcing his resignation. "I chose institutional loyalty over justice, and a child suffered for my cowardice." The Washington home, once destroyed by the raid, was completely renovated through a volunteer effort coordinated by local contractors, many of whom had initially believed the family deserved what happened to them. The rebuilding became symbolic of the community's own reconstruction, with people from diverse backgrounds working side by side to repair physical and social damage. As the family finally settled back into their restored home, they faced the question of what came next. Despite opportunities to relocate to larger cities where their newfound prominence might open new doors, they made the conscious decision to remain in Oak Ridge. "This is our home," Marcus explained during a community meeting. "We won't be driven out. The harder path is staying and helping build something better from the ashes of what was destroyed." That commitment took concrete form when Marcus established a support program for veterans experiencing police violence, recognizing the unique trauma of being targeted by the country they had served. The program quickly expanded nationally, highlighting the disturbing frequency with which veterans, particularly veterans of color, faced excessive force from police unfamiliar with PTSD responses. Elise created a legal clinic providing pro bono representation for victims of police misconduct training, a new generation of attorneys in the innovative approaches that had proven successful in their case. The clinic's sliding scale model ensured that legal support was available regardless of financial resources, addressing one of the primary barriers to justice for marginalized communities. Zora, balancing her continued activism with completing her education, founded a youth journalism program teaching students to document community issues with professional standards. "The story that changes the world might start in your neighborhood," she told her first class of middle school reporters. "But only if someone is brave enough to tell it truthfully." On the one-year anniversary of the verdict, the Washingtons hosted a gathering that brought together families from across the country who had experienced similar raids and intimidation. The day mixed somber reflection, with celebration of victories, healing through shared experience, and strategic planning for ongoing justice work. As evening fell, Marcus stood in their backyard, surrounded by people who had become an extended family, forged through common struggle. Watching Elise deep in conversation with another attorney about upcoming legislation, seeing Zora laughing with youth activists planning their next project, he felt a complex emotion that transcended simple happiness. Their family had been broken but not destroyed, transformed rather than defined by trauma. The freedom he had fought for overseas had nearly been stolen from them at home, but in defending it they had expanded its meaning and extended its promise to others. "The raid wasn't the end of our story," he told a documentary crew filming the gathering. "It was the beginning of a different one than we'd planned. Justice isn't a destination you reach once and celebrate. It's a path you commit to walking every day, bringing as many people along as possible." As night fell over the neighborhood that had rejected them and then embraced them again, the Washington family stood together, changed but unbroken. Their fight for justice neither completely won nor abandoned, but transformed into a lifelong commitment to making America's promises real for everyone. What would you do if faced with the choice between personal safety and fighting for justice? Has this story changed how you think about the relationship between power, race, and property in America? Comment below with your thoughts on what the blank is meant. Washington family's journey teaches us about courage and systemic change. If their story moved, you please like and subscribe to support more narratives that expose injustice and celebrate those who stand against it. Share this video with someone who needs to understand that fighting for justice, while costly, is never wasted. Thank you for joining me on this powerful journey through one family's fight to transform personal trauma into collective liberation. The Washington family's journey teaches us that justice, while difficult to achieve against systemic racism, is possible when courage meets community support. Their story demonstrates how power structures often collaborate police developers, politicians, using racist tactics to displace black families for profit. It reveals how mistakes are rarely accidental when they disproportionately target people of color. When facing injustice, documentation becomes crucial. Zora's journalistic instincts and Elise's legal expertise created an irrefutable record that eventually broke through denial and deception. The importance of allies also cannot be overstated, from Officer Sanderson crossing the blue line to religious leaders and neighbors standing firm despite intimidation. This story shows that individual traumas can become catalysts for structural change when properly channeled through legal media and community organizing strategies. Perhaps most importantly, the Washingtons remind us that staying and rebuilding often creates more lasting change than escaping injustice. Their decision to transform victimhood into advocacy, creating support systems for others facing similar battles, exemplifies how personal healing and social justice reinforce each other. True victory isn't just winning in court, but creating new paths for those who lack resources to fight alone. What injustice in your community needs exposure? Has someone you know faced discrimination that went unchallenged because they lacked resources or support? The Washington family reminds us that silence serves oppression while speaking truth, even at great personal cost, can transform entire systems. If this story moved, you please like this video to help it reach others who need to hear it. Subscribe to join our community dedicated to sharing stories of resilience against racism and injustice. Comment below with experiences from your own community. What systems of power work together to maintain inequality where you live? Share this video with someone who might feel alone in their fight for justice, or with those who don't yet understand how racism operates through seemingly neutral institutions. Thank you for bearing witness to the Washington family's courage. May their story strengthen your resolve to stand against injustice wherever you encounter it, knowing that together we can transform pain into purpose and resistance into lasting change.